わらび餅プリプリわらび餅プルプル
Now you might be wondering what exactly it is that I'm showing you, or rather why I'm showing you. The person that's supposedly singing at the moving van is none other than Nanahira. For many of you, she is someone that needs no introduction, but for those that somehow haven't heard of her, she's perhaps the single most influential vocalist associated to rhythm game history. Her voice is partially responsible for countless tracks that are idolized in the rhythm game community as classics, and with that she's managed to cultivate an incredibly loyal fandom. So loyal, in fact, that it's almost frightening. She's become surprisingly popular compared to other doujin vocalists, and the reason for that is simple. There's something about the tone of her voice and the way she's able to change it at will that makes her singing strangely addicting to just about anyone that listens to it. In fact, 99% of the time, anyone that says they don't like the sound of her voice is probably just too afraid to admit that they like the sound of her lolly. After all, ours the same, regardless of your opinion on her. If you play rhythm games, it's impossible to avoid her name, and at some point the question may have arisen, how did she get to the point she's at today? Let's go back to the beginning and find out. Nanahira was born on August 30th, 1991 in the Fukui prefecture of Japan, where she grew up in a family that, according to her, was always surrounded by music. In fact, when Nanahira was younger, she and her sister used to receive singing lessons from her grandmother, who was a big fan of enka, a traditional style of Japanese music. She didn't receive lessons in earnest, but it was enough to learn the basics, and this is what sparked her interest for singing in the first place. By the time she was entering high school, she would mainly spend her free time playing games and being on the internet, and eventually she came across a website called Nico Nico Doga. Nico was home to many different kinds of videos, since you can consider it a Japanese version of YouTube, but globally it has a reputation of being home to some of the most iconic doujin music of today, spanning across many different types and genres. To be honest, some of the most nonsensical shit I've ever seen in my entire life has turned out to be from Nico Nico. It can truly range from a pretty normal music video to simulating LSD, and something that kind of combined those two aspects was a style of video that was beginning to emerge around mid-2007, a certain type of video called the I Tried to Sing challenge, which is exactly what it sounds like. You pick a popular song, usually a popular Vocaloid or anime song, and you try to do a cover in it using just your voice. This challenge is actually something that many now popular Japanese artists started off with some of the most notable examples being Ryo, Soraru, Jero, and eventually Nanahira herself. In fact, around the time Nanahira took interest in this, the Suit melody on Nico was gaining a lot of popularity. A mashup of 33 songs originated from Nico Nico, and this inspired Nanahira to pick up the microphone she just bought to use for Skype and begin recording something similar. So she got on, made her own account on Nico Nico, creating her name in a rather strange process, gained some courage, and the result? A karaoke cover of Nico Nico Doga Ryosei Musume, released on the 10th of October 2008. For the first ever song that Nanahira uploaded on Nico Nico, this is extremely impressive. A few things make this stand out already compared to your usual vocal covers. The first thing being the mix. There is a lot of voice layering throughout the song, and when I first listened, I was confused on whether this was a duet or if she was just overlaying her voice on someone else's. Turns out every single line is in fact her, and her voice ranges from her infamous lolly voice to a deeper, more mature style. It's surprising that she's still able to maintain her vocal ranges, even when completely switching the tone of her voice this early on. And albeit there are some moments where she's slightly off key, if you listen closely, this definitely showed the early potential she had as a singer. This also did gain some traction, as it sits today at just over 100,000 views, and immediately she began to become what you would call a Nico Nico star. Over time, she would continue to improve her vocals by doing a variety of covers, originally being Vocaloid, Toho arrangements, and songs from certain anime. However, some of the things she covered could also be considered Dempa music, an umbrella term to describe vocal music that have high-pitched vocals, a catchy melody, and an almost excessive amount of energy. A lot of times they also have repetitive chants, and when it's at its extreme, off-key singing. Dempa as a genre is usually generalized as songs that are cute and fast-paced, but the reality is that Dempa actually originally came as a category that people associated with creepiness and darker undertones, and this becomes even more the case when you consider the origins of the name Dempa, which was actually a term used to describe quirky dreamers in the 1990s of Japan. It doesn't sound too bad until you find out that this derived from an assailant of a Japanese serial murder case, the Fukagawa Street Murders. The 29-year-old assailant stabbed 4 people to death in Fukagawa, Tokyo, and when he was eventually confronted in court, he said that electromagnetic waves, aka Dempa, were telling him to kill people. Pretty heavy stuff. Fortunately, Nanahira's music and the things she covers falls under the cute side, and she focused quite a lot on this, whilst also showing off her supreme flexibility to sing between genres in her early years. For example, here she sings a Ryo/Supercell song, and showed off her ability to consistently hit high notes, whilst staying on a pretty low key for someone that normally uses a lolly voice. And then here, all I can say is she ends up going full Dempa. At some point she even did a cover of an advertisement, which to this day I'm not sure at all what they're supposed to be advertising.
そうですね。あの水が案外もったいないんですよ。そこで頑張れおじいちゃんは言ったんです。え？そんなことができるんですか？はい。
There were also some covers that gave me visions of her future style, and perhaps the one that did that the most was her Chirumuru Chirino cover, in which not only does she display her ability to spit an excessive amount of heat, but she also shows her ability to consistently hit high notes again, but this time in a higher key. Not perfect, but her range was definitely increasing from before, where she would struggle with maintaining key or do the complete wrong one. Her Chirumuru Chirino cover was extremely popular again, sitting at 183,000 views, and this, along with everything else, was enough to not only begin being noticed by listeners, but also by fellow musicians. Sometime around early 2009, it was revealed that Nanahira had become a member of her first ever doujin music circle. This was a fairly niche one that started activity around 2007 and mainly focused on producing songs with female vocals, going by the name Foresto Piero. There were quite a lot of members in the team, and actually if you look at this snapshot from 2009, you notice that Nanahira isn't actually on here. What's up with that? It turns out when she started her doujin music activity, she had a completely different alias, Ryo Okamura. It's unknown why this is for now, and before you ask, no, I'm pretty sure this is not her real name, but this would only be for a little while, as she would end up changing to just Nanahira after several works. It's also implied that Nanahira had to go through an entire recruitment process to become an official member, and she wasn't just invited. But any details of this process has been since expunged. Shortly after being recruited, the first song she covered for these guys was for an album called Shooting Star. In the song, there was a rearrangement of the infamous Colonel team. Instead of Tomboyish Girl, we had Marquis Girl, released on the 7th of June 2009. Not a huge amount to say about this, other than her voice being mixed rather quietly and sounding a little bit off key during her verses, but nevertheless this was a significant stepping stone for Nanahira, and this marks the beginning of her major involvement in an almost absurd amount of doujin projects, a lot of which were collaborations with other doujin circles, one in particular being the legendary circle Hello Z. As a matter of fact, Nanahira appeared in Hello Z's second ever released album, Starry Presto, released in December of 2009, where she sang an arrangement of Suako Morio's theme. This was actually also arranged by Yo-Yo Yuppie, who many of you may recognize as the person responsible for songs like I and Palette Is a Small World. A little before this, Nanahira also created a new website that doubled as a portfolio and a way to keep track of all of her work. It was also created as an easier way to make direct contact with her. She decided to call this website Confetto, and here she gave us a little more information about herself, saying she loves songs, dogs, cute things, sweet things, things of that nature. And she also confirmed the purpose of her other alias. Whenever she sang for herself, she went under Nanahira, but whenever singing for others and doing voice work, she went under Ryo Okamura. She did also have a little diary mainly talking about her work, but most of the articles from here unfortunately no longer exist. Although in here, Confetto is just a showcase website, over the next year, as Nanahira continues to do more work, eventually it ends up transitioning into an actual doujin circle, and come August 2010, Nanahira would release her first ever album onto the site, Cheerful 77-Degree Rise. This featured a whole host of people from many different circles, but unfortunately, most of the songs are lost to time now. And although you can find snippets of the lost songs in the Crossfade demo, the only 4 songs that exist at the moment are songs number 1, 2, 4, and 8. I'ma keep it a stack. This album is not really my cup of tea, but if I could pick a good song from here to sum it up, it would definitely be song number 4, Mueto Miedo. This is definitely one of the fastest songs Nanahira had covered up to this point, and this is absolutely the signature style of Dempa music as a whole. The songs that are still up set quite a lot of views still on Nico, but as far as the things Nanahira was already known for, this went quite under the radar. Nonetheless, the people that did listen to this album were generally impressed by her vocal range and flexibility, though some of the lyrics were a bit bizarre, even for Dempa music. For instance, the lyrics for song number 7 are still available, which by the way is called A Cup, and here the story is told of a sister regularly dealing with her brother, who she just found out is a crossdresser, and they already had a bit of a Alabama type relationship going on, if you get what I'm putting down. You can read that if you want, it's in the description. Nanahira now has had a major involvement with doujin music and built a solid reputation on Nico Nico, but of course this was still only the beginning for Nanahira, because if you know anything about doujin music, one thing's for certain: fate eventually leads it to one location. Like I said, Nanahira was pretty well known in the Nico Nico music niche, but outside of that, her name was a rare sight to see, and it didn't seem like she had any intention of featuring in any rhythm games until March 28th, 2012. This was the day that Nanahira made her debut in Bemani and rhythm games in general, featuring on a song with Zuma, who was previously in charge of arrangement for a large portion of Cheerful 77 Degree Rise. This song became part of the Sound Vortex Beef station, essentially songs that you can unlock using in-game currency, added separately to the game a while after the original game released. Excuse my Japanese, but this is called Yasai Mashi Niniku Abura Ome, which appears to be a song about food. Regardless of what she's actually saying, the song is pretty good, and one thing becomes clear from the release of this. Her voice and cadence is built for songs that are suited for rhythm games, such as this. Something about it complements the track well enough so that the voice is definitely noticeable, but at the same time it doesn't completely take over the instrumental, which is what's needed for the chart to be as enjoyable as it is, and it all comes together to create this satisfying chart. The general reception towards this was pretty positive, and even though there is some overlap between hardcore doujin listeners and rhythm gamers, this exposed Nanahira to a wider audience, especially once Sound Vortex would start to go global. Even with this though, I don't think anyone could have predicted how Nanahira would have ended up taking the rhythm game world by storm over the next few years, and there's a plethora of reasons why this would end up being, but there's only one primary cause. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Camellia. Realistically, if you're watching, you definitely know who Camellia is, so I'm sure he needs no introduction. Mr. Kametek is someone who's been producing music for years prior, and 2012 was a time where no one knew his name, and he actually wasn't focusing on making rhythm game music, but he was slowly starting to transition into it, and his music was beginning to take heavy inspiration from them. Apparently, Camellia had already heard of Nanahira from Nico. She was already high profile on the platform after all, and somehow, she had also heard Camellia's music. Nanahira needed some more arrangers for a new album she was releasing, so of course they ended up getting into contact, and Camellia ended up writing his first arrangement for Nanahira to sing over. This would end up being released as part of Nanamix, Confetto's second album, on August 11th, 2012, with the track going by the name Getaway. So, what do you get when you combine the hyper, hard-hitting sound of an upcoming rhythm game music genius and the dempa singing talent of a Nico Nico star? Well, you get this. This feels a lot more different to what we heard before. It's similar in style to the food song from earlier, but a lot faster paced, and it feels like there's a lot more going on in the instrumental. Every second has some new sound or a slight rhythm variation to add flavor to the already chaotic track, and Nanahira manages to complement this really well, even going the route of using some Vocaloid to create a pseudo duet song. Yes, you heard me right. This definitely surprised me because this isn't just any Vocaloid program. What's used is Haruka Nana, a Vocaloid of Nanahira, created all the way back in 2009 by a team of people she gathered. Turns out it's also been in distribution since then, but updates to it has ceased activity since 2014. I find it surprising that I haven't heard this used much, but at the same time, I wouldn't want a 10-year-old Vocaloid singing in my ears, but I digress. Alongside all of this, in true Camellia fashion, the song ends with this section. The reason why this leaves such an impression is because this is likely where Nanahira realized the insane potential of working as a duo like this. Just like her last track that was in Sound Vortex, she's using her voice to support the track rather than have it be the main focus. But the way Camellia was able to synergize his instrumentals with her vocals was on a completely different level to before. Not to mention, Camellia has demonstrated extensive knowledge of dempa music in general. For example, Camellia in an interview has talked about the kind of knowledge you need to make an effective dempa track, saying, "It's difficult to make unless you have the appropriate knowledge to combine order and confusion." His intuition on this kind of stuff runs very deep, likely from a lot of exposure, and Nanahira noticed this, and as a result, continues to invite Camellia onto her CDs. From here, they built a relationship of doing a lot of collaborations together, with Camellia being invited to several tracks in Chemo Love in December of 2012, and Free Playing in August of 2013. They would also end up doing a collaboration that would end up releasing to Sound Vortex 2 in 2013, and this would be their debut as a duo onto Bemani. In short, Camellia says in that same interview from before that he wanted to apply for a rhythm game contest, in particular the It's Summer, It's a Holiday free study contest, and in order to do that he would need vocals. So this time, instead of Nanahira inviting him for an arrangement, Camellia invited Nanahira to add her vocals, and with that, the duo Camellia featuring Nanahira was born, and they created a song basically worshipping conveyor belt sushi that would end up getting adopted to create this incredibly hyperactive frenzy of a chart. Eventually, they would even end up doing an entire album together in August of 2014 called Beisasu. 11 songs, all composed by Camellia and all sung by Nanahira. Each song is hyper and chaotic as the other. Just to give you an idea, have a I don't think I'm entirely wrong in saying that these two are on a completely different wavelength to anyone else, no pun intended. And funnily enough, at the time, still barely anyone gave these artists notice as a duo. But frankly, this would completely change, and nothing could have prepared them for what was yet to come. Fast forward to September 17th, 2014. This was the day that the 22nd edition of Beatmania, Pendule, was released. This was a Beatmania with a very heavy theme on time and clocks, and with it came a variety of new game mechanics to Beatmania, as well as a bunch of new songs. This game is responsible for many classics that you may recognize, like Chrono Diver, Disclose, Line for Ruin, Invitation from Mr. C, and the inevitable song that you've probably been waiting for me to mention. A song that rocked the rhythm game world, and could easily be considered the breakout song for both Camellia and Nanahira, Bassdrop Freaks. What makes this so different to the other songs this duo have made? Well, honestly, I'm sure it speaks for itself. Of course, the main spectacle is Camellia's godlike EDM production, but Nanahira's supporting vocals also helps to add an appropriate flavor to the theme of the song. As Camellia himself says, usually his songs are based on radio hits, and he incorporates a lot of A-pop and synth-pop into the song to combine with drum step and tempo to create this, I don't want to say abomination because the song is really good, but genre-wise, you're damn right it's an abomination. This absolutely transcends the tempo we were hearing earlier. And even Nanahira admitted to this being something completely different, as she mentioned it not feeling like a Dempa song while she made up lyrics from her mind while singing. Because of just how unique and how much of a banger the song was, as well as the quality of the BMS chart in question, it was only a matter of time before the song ended up exploding in popularity, becoming a fan favorite in the Beatmania series, and as a result, also making its way to the more international rhythm games, such as Stepmania and eventually Osu. And as this song blew up, so did Nanahira and Camellia. Nanahira was already pretty popular as is, but this was the start of what got her even more fans overseas, and this, combined with what she would end up releasing later, would be what would make her reputation in rhythm games set in stone. For now though, her and Camellia would use this momentum to continue producing music, and while this was taking place, Nanahira would simultaneously begin to pursue other areas. See, one of the things that people seem to immediately think when they hear Nanahira is she sounds like a young idol, at least in my experience, but not many people seem to know that technically, yes, she is an idol. A little while before the release of Bassdrop Freaks, a certain man was particularly interested in getting himself into the field of idols. This was a person heavily affiliated with Vocaloid production who went by the name Tenko Mori, and he was someone with a steady following, so it made sense as to why he would feel like this, since Vocaloid nowadays is heavily inspired by idol performances. On top of this, he had already known Nanahira. She had done collaborations with him dating all the way back to 2012, producing a song for her to sing on Nico Nico, so he had his eyes on her as a candidate to help grow into the culture of idolization. He also had connections with another individual, an experienced voice actor who's worked with a couple of animes as side characters, as well as some games and a pretty large dialect revitalization project for the Agency of Cultural Affairs of Japan. This person was Iku Arino. Tenko Mori thought it would be an interesting dynamic seeing someone who was mainly self-taught and did a lot of her work on the internet be paired with someone who has done a lot of academic work and has a large formal employment history, so he reached out to them, proposing the idea of forming a group, and on the 9th of April 2014, they'd make their first appearance in a show at Tsutaya Ones. They would then make their official public unveil on April the 19th, 2014, in the Maniacs DJ party, and this is where the two stars were officially revealed together, calling themselves Suehiro Antenna, and for the show they performed an unreleased song called Love Gigahertz that would come out only 4 days after this on the 23rd. When you listen to the full thing, you can quickly see that dynamic play out. Nanahira had her usual energetic, powerful voice, and she was accompanied by Arino, who had a calmer, more mature voice. It made for a pretty decent contrast, and the arrangement was definitely something different to the usual, which was brilliantly composed by someone called Masaya Oya, aka Camellia? Yep, you didn't hear this from me, but Camellia is most certainly an eternal slave to Nanahira, and this was yet another endeavor that he found himself assisting her in, alongside Tenko Mori and the backup production team. Actually, not only does the second track's production scream Camellia, but it's also incredibly catchy, and I'm surprised this hasn't made waves, at least in the rhythm game community. This is like a 10 times better version of Bassdrop Freaks, and it has the addition of that satisfying duet harmony. This team really did seem like they had a lot of potential. They debuted with 2 bangers, already had a decent following, and both Nanahira and Arino had a charm and looks that gave them the presence of an idol. Chances are you might be watching this as a Nanahira fan, wondering how you haven't heard of this. That's because the Suehiro Antenna team would pretty much cease activity after the release of those 2 songs. It's completely unknown as to what happened. Like I said, they had a lot of potential, and they had clearly put a lot into the project. Maybe it was funding, maybe one of the leaders of the projects left. What we can be sure of is that it definitely wasn't due to fallout between the 2 idols. Nanahira and Iku Arino were last seen interacting in an event in 2020, long after the release of the first 2 songs, performing those very same Suehiro Antenna songs for Iku Arino's birthday festivals. These birthday festivals happened frequently in the years they were inactive, and whenever they did happen, it seemed like there was a glimmer of a chance of reviving the old pair, but unfortunately, to this day, Suehiro Antenna remains inactive. But time goes on, and Nanahira continued on making Nico covers and lots of contributions to rhythm games around the world, mainly Sound Vortex and Beatmania. Of course, this meant she did continue collaborating with Camellia, who would end up releasing the legendary album Force in December of 2017. Even the name was a clever play on words, since it's a 4 in the title, and this was Camellia and Nanahira's 4th album together. Honestly, for many, including myself, this album is the pinnacle of the duo's creativity and ability, and it feels like everything that they've done so far led up to this insane, high-powered album. The presence of Nanahira in this is unmatched, again managing to fill tracks with her vocals, whilst being able to completely synergize with the insanity that is now Camellia's production. And the pace could vary a lot as well. One second you have songs like Heartbeat Overheat, which is a burst of energy even when compared to previous songs Nanahira has done, and then you have infamous songs like Can I Friend You on Bassbook, which is much slower and catchy. Actually, fun fact, this wasn't meant to be a play on words on Facebook like everyone thinks it is, but rather Line, which is the most popular social media messaging app in Japan, hence the chorus, bass, line. This right here quickly became Camellia and Nanahira's most popular song, hell, most popular album, and got them even more international exposure as it began to feature in games like Archaea, OS, and Muse Dash several months later. By now, Nanahira has achieved full mastery of her vocals and has managed to steal the hearts of thousands, no, millions with her vocal work. And she also has started doing some VTube streaming on YouTube, so you know, be sure to check those out, as well as support her music. Links to her platforms are in the description. Also, I just wanted to give a quick thanks for 1,000 subscribers again. That is honestly mental. For something this niche, it was hard to imagine getting this far, so truly, I appreciate the support. I've made a Discord server in honor of this, and I'm gonna try to be as active as I can on there, within the limits of my mountain of schoolwork and actually making videos. So if you want to chill and talk about rhythm games and whatnot, then consider joining. After all, you can always leave the server later if it's not to your liking, but if you don't want to, no pressure. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment on who you want to see next. P.S. This is the closest thing you get to a Camellia history video until he likes that goddamn tweet, and I'll catch you in a bit.